This week on Lewis on the Law, I've got another great show for you. I have attorney Jeff Nixon with me, and we're going to talk about living conditions in the BLUFF.
Welcome to Lewis on the Law.
You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I have yet another fantastic show for you guys today. And in the spirit of empowering you, the listener, this show is all about empowering you. I have attorney Jeff Nixon with me, and Jeff is an attorney with Taylor English, but more importantly, you're a board member of Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation. So you do great work out there in the community. Of course, Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers do great work in the community. And, you know, we've got this fascinating topic today because Jeff works inside what is one of Atlanta's most infamous, maybe probably Atlanta's most infamous drug hole, or I don't know how else you might want to call it, but the blighted neighborhood. And it's known across America for what goes on there. And you work inside this area, and the area is called the BLUFF, right?
Correct. It's called the BLUFF, which stands for Better Leave You Expletive Fool.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for leaving the expletive off. This is there are kids in there, but I didn't realize that. I mean, I'd heard of the BLUFF before. It's been called out in like a famous song by Kid Rock, and you know, it's kind of mentioned, and you hear about it every now and then. But I thought it was probably this probably scenic area that overlooks Atlanta, and there's a you know, a geographical bluff that forms the area or something like that.
No, quite to the contrary. It's actually the English Avenue, Vine City neighborhoods that are just west of the old Georgia Dome, the current Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And it's really bordered on the south by Morehouse, Spelman College, Atlanta Clark University, the old Morris Brown University. On the north by the Marietta, really artery, they call it. On the east by Northside Drive and the one brand new stadium. And then on the west by Joseph Lowery Boulevard. And the BLUFF is contained in those areas, as well as, depending upon how it's defined, the Washington Park, Bankhead Highway areas that are just west of those two neighborhoods.
Oh, okay, and I think they've done songs about Bankhead Highway too.
Yeah, it's
UFOs on Bankhead or something.
The
like
whole
that.
area is quite well known. There's a lot of drug activity. Back when I started working in the BLUFF, back about 10 years ago now, it was the 5th most dangerous neighborhood in the entire country.
In the entire country?
The entire country. It's still known as probably the drug capital of the Southeast, primarily heroin. And it was actually kind of made a little infamous by this fella, Curtis Snow, who was a drug dealer on the BLUFF.
And that last name, I guess it's perfect, Curtis Snow. Yeah,
correct.
Okay,
Snow
yeah.
just fits in right with his
with his
right with his profession.
Yeah.
And so some college students came in, and they were I guess they were naive to the BLUFF, and they actually had a video camera and were trying to film their ordeals with Mr. Snow. And he stole the video camera and shooed them away, and then he proceeded to make a YouTube video that he called Snow on the BLUFF, THA BLUFF. And it was about his drug dealings and how it interacted with him and his family, and actually his small child is actually in the film also.
Oh my God, he had a small child in that area, in that environment?
Well, there's a lot of children that live over in the BLUFF.
Well, I guess there are children everywhere, so it just shows how naive I am about that.
And the BLUFF is a mixture of two things. It's a huge drug activity, but it's also one of the last remaining vestiges where people can get affordable housing in the city of Atlanta. The average rent over there is probably in the range of $500.
Wow, that's really cheap, actually.
It's very cheap, and there's some really good reasons for that. One of them is that a lot of investors, and especially offshore investors, not just Americans, but people that don't even live in this country, are investing over there because the Beltline, if it ever gets finished in that area, is going to run through that area, and real estate prices are going to skyrocket. So what you have is most of the people over there that actually have property that's occupied don't put any money into it because they're waiting for the property to increase, and then they'll sell it to other developers. About 50% of the properties over there are boarded up and dilapidated. In fact, it was the number one area for arson in the city because you'd have homeless people who would break into a boarded up house, and how did they stay warm? There's no heat.
They'd start a fire.
They'd start a fire, and the house would burn down. So there's a number of areas over there that are burned down. There's a number of areas, probably 50% of them are unoccupied, either burned or just boarded up. They could have people living in them, even though they're boarded up, because they'll just break down the door in the back.
And then just sneak in.
Yeah, and then probably I'd say 30 to 40% of the places over there are run by slumlords who just let their places just erode and don't put any money into them, waiting for their property and real estate prices to increase. And then there's some legitimate folks who live over there, homeowners who really care and are trying to make a difference. But I'd say they're in the minority.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of where you come in the legal aspect, is you actually help people in dealing with slumlords in that area. Is that correct?
Yes, I started about 10 years ago on an apartment complex called Chappelle Forest. And it was a 230-unit apartment complex, but there were only 30 people living there.
My God.
Yeah, and there were about 20 buildings there. Some of them were burnt out. Some of them were abandoned, and they were occupied by drug dealers, prostitutes, and the homeless. And then 30 of the units were actually occupied by paying tenants. I became involved in it because 7 of those paying tenants were the object of an eviction proceeding. They refused to pay rent until their places were fixed up. Most of them had serious problems. They had rat infestation. They had open sewage flowing through their units, especially from above. They had leaks in the roofs. They had no heat. They had no hot water. They had non-functioning refrigerators and other utilities. So they basically didn't even have a decent roof over their head. Well, when these people refused to pay rent to this investor, supposedly, that lived in Las Vegas, by the way, he moved to evict them. So we challenged and defended them in the eviction proceeding. And as it turned out, we found out that he didn't even own the property. He was he was collecting rent and evicting people that for property he didn't even own.
Well, wait a minute. How did that come about? That's crazy.
Well, you're in the Wild West over there, so people don't know. You have a number of people who, if someone shows up as a sign of authority, they think that they are who they are, and they don't know. How do you prove someone doesn't own something if he comes and says you have to pay me rent, and if you don't, I'm going to evict you? There's really hardly a way to do that. In fact, after we ended up getting that place shut down, and when we got it shut down, I don't even think the city of Atlanta can identify even to this day who owns that property, because it's in an LLC, and the LLC is no longer continued. So it's just sitting out there and just sitting there vacant, even to this day.
That's crazy. And I know some cities, especially cities like Philadelphia and Detroit, have done a great thing with adverse possession laws so that areas like that could actually be addressed. But Atlanta doesn't really have that liberal of an adverse possession law. So.
No, and we've urged the city to take it because there's over $1 million in property taxes, over $1 million in sewer and water. And meanwhile, this fellow was collecting rent payments from the folks who live there.
Yeah.
Right now, it's just fenced in, sitting there, and it's beside the future Beltline. So it could be made into a beautiful park. Yeah. I know when we talked to the folks from the city, they didn't want the liability of taking it. We talked to Atlanta Land Bank, and they had the same feeling about it. They would inherit this number of buildings that are vacant and, quite frankly, used for illicit purposes.
Yeah.
And nobody wanted to take it on. We even approached Atlanta Fire and said, "Can you just burn them?" And they said, "No, because that's against EPD. You can't go ahead and burn these things down because it would cause more pollution to our already polluted skies."
Yeah.
So it just sits there right now with all these outstanding debts owed, and vagrants and everyone else are using it.
I'm surprised the city hasn't actually confiscated the area for property taxes.
I'm stunned. I don't know why they wouldn't.
Yeah.
That was my first thought. I mean, they should just take it and use it for something other than what it's being used for.
Yeah, it just seems like that's a huge amount of waste. And maybe it's too big a project. I mean, maybe they have to wrap their minds around actually doing that.
There's 2 other apartment complexes of similar size right by it that I went by the other day, and one of them is being renovated now. So it appears that a developer has actually stepped in, but nobody's taken on Chappelle Forest. And in fact, there's actually some fascinating, if you go online, there's a YouTube about Chappelle Forest created by some young filmmakers called Terminus Zone 1 that just has scenes of Chappelle Forest put to music, and it just shows you how devastating this area is. And it's a couple of miles from the $1.8 million, the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
That's incredible. And of course, we have our own filmmaker here, Anthony. Maybe you might want to take that on as a subject. We're almost at the end of this segment. Jeff, will you give them some contact information for you?
Sure. Well, I'm at Taylor English in Duma. My name is, again, is Jeff Nix. And you're welcome to call me, anyone, 404-307-2625. And if you're interested, though, in the AVLF, the fellow who runs the eviction defense is a guy named Cole Thaler, and his number is 404-521-0790. And again, that's the AVLF, Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation.
Excellent. You're listening to Lewis on the Law, and I want to make sure that you guys know that this show is streaming nationally on every single national streaming platform you can think of. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, you name it, you can stream us nationally. If you'd like to check out any of my old shows, they're all archived on my website. You can go, and if you have an idea for a show that you'd like to hear, you can just drop me a line on the back page. My website is jameslewislegal.com. You can email me at james@jameslewislegal.com, or you can give me a phone call at 404-610-0075, and I'll bring on an attorney, and we will talk about that topic. When we get back, we're going to talk about some economic conditions inside the BLUFF. You are listening to Lewis on the Law, and I had to bring back a little Jimi Hendrix because I love Jimmy. He's one of my guitar gods. I am on the air with attorney Jeff Nix. We have a great show about empowering you. This will actually give you a little bit of information. And once again, when we're speaking information, and this show is only for informational purposes only. If you have a serious legal issue, you need to go ahead and contract with an attorney. If later on, we might talk about damages or some of the defenses that go into combating an eviction from a slumlord. We don't want you to take that and say, I heard this on Lewis on the Law, and so I'm going to take this into my own hands. Though you can, if you have a serious legal issue, go ahead and contract with an attorney. A lot of attorneys appear on the show. You can always give me a shout out at 404-610-0075. And if I can't help you with your legal issue, I can direct you towards an attorney who can help you with your legal issue. Jeff, when we just left off, we were really getting into some of the conditions in the BLUFF. So I want to talk about some of the economic conditions that you have to deal with, and especially since you actually help people in their eviction defense against slumlords. What is it like in there? I mean, I guess the rent is $500. How much are these people making?
Most of them make minimum wage. A lot of them are disabled, so they're on disability or Social Security. Mm-hmm. And those that aren't basically are making minimum wage, $7.25 an hour, thereabouts. Mm-hmm. And their net take home is less than $1,000 a month.
That's brutal. Yeah,
and mind you, rent. The average rent there is $500. So they're spending about half of their net take home. Very few people there own cars. They don't have car insurance. They don't have cars because there's not enough money left after you pay for rent. And some of that rent excludes utilities. Some of it, oftentimes they have to pay their own utilities on top of that. And then life there is difficult. There are no grocery stores. There's really no fast food on the BLUFF. On the very southern edge.
So there's no groceries. Is it a true food desert then?
It's a food desert.
Okay.
Now there are what I would call there's stores that have bars on the windows that may sell snack foods, but they're not selling anything healthy.
Yeah, they're not selling vegetables or fruit or even healthy lean meats.
Now, on the south side, way down by Morehouse, there's a Chick-fil-A and there's a Walmart, and so in fact, Busy Bees, the barbecue place, is down there. So you. Down at that area, you can get food. But
wait a minute, Busy Bees? Is that like a fried chicken place? Is that the place where the famous fried chicken comes from?
Yeah, it's a very popular barbecue fried chicken place.
Okay.
It's excellent. In fact, it's hard to get into.
I think that was on the Food Network. I've been wondering where that place was. I think it was Busy Bees. Is it like Busy Bees Cafe or something like that?
Yeah, and it's on the south side of the BLUFF, the very far south side of the BLUFF.
I have heard. I'm shocked that you mentioned that. I have heard of that. I saw it on the Food Network. They were actually doing the best fried chicken in America, and that place was like, I think they got the best fried chicken here in Georgia, in the state of Georgia.
It's excellent.
Which is saying a lot because Georgia, there's a lot of fried chicken going on in Georgia.
The people that I represent never have the money to go there. They can't even afford it, so they just talk about it.
Yeah, so it's the outside people like me who saw it on Food Network who are drifting in there on a Sunday afternoon.
And it's right on the edge of Morehouse and Spelman and Atlanta Clark University. So they have no shortage. It's long lines to get in there.
Yeah, I've heard it's infamous. I mean, they've been on Food Network, so
it's not the people on the bluff that are eating there. For the most part.
That's actually sad. I'm laughing at it, but it's a serious sad condition when the only thing you have to feed your kid are Cheetos and the meat sticks, the processed meat sticks.
5 of the clients I just represented in a case, I brought them out to eat at J.R. Cricket's over on North Avenue, and 2 of them had never been out to eat in their lives, and they're in their 50s.
Oh, my God.
So you could imagine when you grow up in an area that's working poor, you don't go out to eat that often. And they thought it was the best thing since sliced bread to go out and eat at J.R. Cricket's and have chicken wings.
Oh, my God. That is really horrible. I mean, that breaks my heart.
Well, so the Bluff is a mixture of it's a large percentage of very working poor people who just make minimum wage, and since they don't have cars, they have to live on a bus line, and usually their life is taking a bus to a MARTA station to downtown, or walking. But then obviously that's a problem when you're walking through the Bluff.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be.
So
it's intimidated me, that's for sure. I'm just like, ooh, I don't know if I'd want to do that.
So it's an actually interesting mix. So you have a criminal element over there, but then you also have working poor, very innocent people just trying to make a living and trying to live close to Atlanta. And even a lot of those folks are starting to get forced out just because of lack of housing over there, lack of housing stock. A lot of it's abandoned. A lot of it's shut down. Unfortunately, we're shutting some of it down. And then they have to flee to other areas like Clayton County or get outside the city, outside of Fulton County.
It seems like life would be better if they actually fled that area.
It would be, but a lot of them, that's their area. It's
and the problem, of course, is affordable housing.
It is. It's affordable housing, and Sunset Boulevard there was where Martin Luther King lived when he was assassinated, and that's actually one area of the Bluff that seems to have some respect. Nobody seems to mess with Sunset Boulevard in that area where he once lived.
Yeah.
But so there's a lot of people that have that heritage. They want to live in MLK's old neighborhood. They want to be where he was. There's like a kindred spirit.
I have MLK speaking on my intro, so
and people, and that's their church. That's where their church is, and here's another thing. Here's why I'm so passionate about eviction defense. When I started, probably 10 years ago, the graduation rate in Atlanta public schools, high schools, was about 55%. AVLF came in and did a study. Why is it so low? This is terrible. And they found out that a lot of kids are dropping out of school even before they reach high school, in grade school and middle school, because if they're getting evicted, they're not staying in the same school. Imagine if you're 7 or 8 years old and you're in 3rd or 4th grade and you have a different teacher in a different school 3 or 4 times each year, each calendar year. So you're constantly rotating from different schools to different teachers and different ways they teach, and then trying to make new friends. And then either getting bullying or having to be the bully in order to survive. And so you just lose interest in school because you go into survival mode.
Yeah, and that's really difficult even on the parents, because I know once an eviction is on your record, it goes into your credit history, and it becomes difficult to even rent a second apartment.
It becomes very difficult, especially if they're doing any sort of a credit check, and so these people don't have their hand-to-mouth existence. They don't have first, last, and current month's rent to put down. So a lot of the people that I've represented, they get lulled into believing if they move to the Bluff, it'll be a nice place. And they put down everything they have in the world, move everything they own in the world into the apartment, and then basically everything they own gets ruined.
Yeah. I mean, it's the infestation you were talking about. I mean, you have everything from cockroaches to bed bugs.
To rats. To mice. To lizards and snakes in some instances.
Yeah. So one of my first jobs, one of my first legal positions was as a legal fellow at the Atlanta Beltline, and I know starting out at the Atlanta Beltline, they had a noble vision of creating a combination, a symbiosis of affordable housing and walkable development, and the exact opposite thing has happened, where there is no affordable housing where the Beltline goes.
And the Beltline isn't quite through the entire Bluff yet. It's scheduled to go through there. It'll essentially bisect the Bluff. But then right now you've got a mixture of people who are anticipating that, so buying up and doing nothing with the property until it goes through, and then probably hoping to sell it or develop it. And then other folks who basically buy it up and board it up, so that housing just disappears. So it's become a real dilemma over there. And again, we're forcing a lot of the working poor further outside of city limits.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially with the scarcity of actual true affordable housing here in Atlanta. So I hear there's a lot of investment going on inside the BLUFF, though. I mean, Hollywood's coming. I mean, they're filming movies and television shows in that area, aren't they?
They film over there. In fact, at Chappelle Forest, when I got involved with Chappelle Forest, a movie company came in that had Terrence Howard and Arnold Schwarzenegger. At the time, it was called 10. I know it's since been released, and this was back in 2011. And they came in and they actually rented the Chappelle Forest from the absentee landlord who didn't own the place. They rented it and came in and set up shop to film a portion of the movie. And the portion they were filming was to be a meth lab. And
wow, I guess that's appropriate in that area.
It was appropriate, but when they came, they actually approached the building they wanted to set up the meth lab in and decided that no self-respecting individual would ever believe a meth lab would set up there. So they started fixing it up. And the clients we were representing at the time who were being evicted came out and were...
Wait a minute. So why would no self-respecting individual believe that a meth lab would... Sounds like that's the ideal area for a meth lab.
It was horrific.
Oh, it was bad that even a meth lab would not set up there?
Even a meth lab wouldn't go there.
My God. Okay, that's pretty bad.
And so... So the people came out and were applauding, thinking that this was the landlord there to fix it up. And then the folks that were there from the studio were amazed that people lived there. And then it was almost surreal over the next couple of weeks because they set up catering tents and brought in all their movie equipment and actually fixed up a portion of the building that no one lived in order to set up their scenes for the meth lab. And then I was told that they hired some of the folks as extras because they were obviously living there.
And they would look like they're addicts.
Yeah, they would look like they were working poor.
Yeah.
And so they ultimately...
Okay, I guess I should take that back. They wouldn't look like they were addicts.
There were homeless people there too. There were folks that would I don't think they were the ones that were hired. I think it was the working poor that lived there, and they were thrilled. And they thought that maybe Hollywood would help them and do something for them. But, Hollywood came and then rolled up its trucks and left them in the same condition that they had originally appeared in.
That's the way Hollywood does. Okay, Jeff, we're at the end of this segment. Can you give them some contact information both for you and for AVLF?
Sure. Again, my name is Jeff Nix. I'm at Taylor English. My number is 404-307-2625. And for Cole Thaler, he's at the AVLF, and he helps he's actually running the Safe Families Division of the AVLF, and his number is 404-521-0790.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law. We're at the end of this segment. When we get back, we're going to talk about the work Jeff actually does inside these areas. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I am your host this week and every week. And I have yet another awesome show coming your way. And this show is designed to empower you, the listener. We bring you legal information, but this is in no way legal advice. We're about to talk about Jeff's work. So if you hear some sort of legal information here, don't take that as advice. Don't go ahead and try and do something on your own. If you have a serious legal issue, you can contact an attorney. If you're in one of these types of conditions, contact Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers. I also take pro bono clients with Atlanta Legal Aid, so I feel good about mentioning them here on air. But if you're in a serious situation, you might want to contact one of the organizations that are out there that are designed to help you. This show is streaming on every single national platform you can think of: Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. We are also AI compatible. You can say, hey, Google, play Lewis on the Law, episode 51 with attorney Jeff Nix, and this show will start streaming through your speakers. So we are AI compatible. Welcome to the new era. Jeff, when we left off, we were talking about economic conditions inside the BLUFF. And I won't say what it stands for, but better leave, you fool. Essentially. But let's talk about your work. I mean, I know you've recently had a great victory. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. I recently, 2 years ago, I got involved with a smaller apartment complex because most of the big apartment complexes, 100, 200 plus units, are shut down over in the Bluff. So there's no large-scale apartment complexes over there. So there's smaller-scale apartment complexes. And one I got involved with recently, about 2 years ago.
Can I ask you, what do you mean by a smaller-scale apartment complex
18,
versus
18 units?
Okay, 18 units.
When I'm usually talking smaller scale, you've got 10 to 30 unit complexes over there, and then you've got 100+ complexes over there. Most of the 100+ complexes are completely shut down. They're not livable.
Yeah.
And I'd say probably 60 to 70% of the 10 to 30 or 40 unit complexes are shut down and non-livable. So I got involved with an 18 unit apartment complex over in the Bluff with a lady about 2 years ago. She was being evicted by the then landlord because she had refused to pay rent. She had no heat, no hot water. Her stove didn't work. Her back door didn't open. Her windows wouldn't open. The carpet was probably circa right around the time the place was built, the 1950s.
So she's living under the exact same conditions as someone who's squatting there, basically.
Basically. In fact, her front door wouldn't lock, so someone had to be home at all times. And she lived there with her daughter and her daughter's two children in a two-bedroom apartment that was basically unlivable. So they couldn't prepare food there, and they couldn't go around the corner and buy food. You had to take a real hike to go find food. And she was being evicted because she had refused to pay rent until the place was fixed up.
Yeah.
So I got involved in defending her in eviction court. Here, evictions here are held in Magistrates Court.
Yeah.
Down Fulton County Magistrates Court.
Yeah.
And so one of the first things we did with her, we said, this place, there's multiple housing code violations here. Call the housing code officer. And in Atlanta, the housing code is administered by the police force, which doesn't make a lot of sense because you don't think police would be familiar with the housing code. And they're quite frankly,
are the police familiar with the housing code?
Not in my experience.
Okay.
They're not. And these aren't police officers per se, but they're employees of the police. And, you'd think that when they went out there, they'd be more accustomed to these situations. But I think they're more working in other areas where there might be minor housing code violations. Here you literally, one of the problems they have is they have this citation sheet, just like a traffic citation. It only has so much room for citations. And when you go to these places, the
list is just a laundry list.
Exactly. And so if you have a citation that could take 4 violations, it's useless.
Yeah.
They need a checklist when they go to these places.
Yeah.
Because you could check off 20 or 30 problems before you even get anywhere, just from the outside. But interesting, one of my first interaction with a housing inspector for Ms. Cochran was he looked on the inside and he said, "I'm not going in there." So he made all of his observations.
Wait a minute. He said he wouldn't go into her apartment?
He wasn't going to go in her apartment.
Why? Are the conditions that bad?
The conditions are that bad. You can see mold. You can see bugs. You can hear her telling you about how there's bed bugs everywhere.
Oh,
and
God.
If you walk on this carpet, whatever's in there is going to hop onto you.
Oh, my God. What about her children that are living under those conditions?
It was horrific. My first time there, I saw probably a 2-year-old in a swinging cradle.
Oh, God.
And there were cockroaches crawling on the child.
Oh,
now, the
Jesus
mother's
Christ.
wiping them off. These are good mothers. They're doing their best, but you're in conditions where you have every biting creature you can think of wandering around in this apartment. Now, so the landlord was doing nothing about it, even though pest control is in the lease. So AVLF came in and provided a ton of bug spray. They provided heaters. They provided air conditioners. They provided everything they could to make life more bearable. But, there's only a certain amount of bug spray you can put in a place before it's going to become toxic to even the inhabitants.
Yeah. Yeah, that is, hearing about a cockroach crawling on a child, that's horrible.
Yeah, and you think about it, so this place is extremely humid because it's got no heat, no AC.
No AC.
And so it's not comfortable to even be inside. And the windows don't open and the back door doesn't open.
Okay.
And the front door doesn't lock. So I got involved with her. First of all, when you go over there, as in myself, people, I'm not don't look like I'm from there.
Yeah,
so
right.
People thought that I was a police officer or someone trying to serve a warrant.
And you have a slightly, is it Boston accent? So you come across as a little bit of that guy on one of those television TV shows.
Like a bad guy to them.
Yeah.
They clearly knew I was an outsider. So, to them, I'm either a cop or I'm somebody there to serve process, or I'm there for some purpose that could hurt someone.
Yeah.
So I think I was saying earlier, it took me a while to get street cred where people would even talk to me. But once I started helping this client, and then we successfully defended her eviction defense, you start to get street cred. And so her next door neighbor said, "I've got a problem."
Yeah.
And
people
she
start
approached
realizing that you're one of the good guys there.
Yeah. And so ultimately, 6 families out of this 18-unit apartment complex, and there were 18 units there, 10 of which were unlivable, 8 of which had renters, and 6 of the families there ultimately sought me out to help them because they were in unbearable conditions.
Yeah.
This particular unit, the first unit I was involved in, got even worse because the sewage backed up and sewage was spouting out of her toilet and her bathtub. And then,
oh my God, sewage was spouting?
Raw sewage was spouting, and so much of it flowed that it flowed out of the bathroom onto the carpet.
Oh God.
One of the other ladies, a couple of the other ladies I got involved with over there, very similar conditions to this, except one of them actually had raw sewage flowing through her kitchen every time the neighbor upstairs flushed the toilet. There was a hole in the sewer pipe, and sewage would flow right through her kitchen.
That's disgusting. I have a very weak gag reflex, so just the idea of that is completely disgusting, and it's incredible people are living in that condition.
They have no choice. They have no choice. They don't have the money to move, and like I said, that you get stuck there, and a lot of them, all of their worldly possessions are there. And so their possessions are getting mold and mildew and infested with roaches, bugs and rodents. And something that I didn't know, even in electronics, German roaches love electronics. They nest in electronics.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So they go inside of the electronics, and literally this one lady had a TV. The entire back of the TV was filled with roach eggs. And you can't spray bug spray into the TV because you're going to kill it, but you can't move the TV because roaches come out of it every time you touch it. And sooner or later, they just start to gnaw at everything, and the rats and everything else is getting and gnawing at the power cord so that the TV is basically no good.
Yeah.
So, and this happened with their microwaves. This happened with their TVs. Not that they have brand new flat screen TVs. These are the old style, old school TVs with the big, huge backs. Yeah.
That is incredible. What about the landlords? Do they know the conditions that they're subjecting people to?
The landlord that I was dealing with would basically say, if you don't like the conditions, move.
I've heard that before, just defending landlord tenants for AVLF.
We tried a case against this landlord in December of 2017 in front of a judge, and the judge was so appalled they hit the landlord with $15,000 in punitive damages because the landlord showed complete disregard for the human condition. Just didn't care about the people at all.
Yeah.
And literally, even in court, said, well, they could always leave if they didn't like it.
Yeah.
I don't understand why they stay there.
Yeah, that is incredible. Okay, so we're already at the end of this segment. I want to get more into this because this is an incredible story you're telling here. Give them some contact information for you once again, and AVLF also, Jeff.
Okay, again, my name is Jeff Nix. I'm with Taylor English and Duma, and my number is 404-307-2625. And Cole Thaler is in charge of the of safe families and housing with the AVLF, and his number is 404-521-0790.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis. I am your host, and we are here to empower you, the individual. If you have a serious legal issue, don't rely on what you hear here on the air. Go ahead and give me or contact an attorney. If you can't find one, I can help you find an attorney. I have a lot of them that come through this show. You can give me a call at 404-610-0075. All my old shows are archived on my website, jameslewislegal.com. If you have an idea or a topic you'd like to hear discussed on this show, I know several of you have already reached out and contacted me before. Just go ahead and go to my contact page, drop me a line, tell me what you'd like to hear talked about, and I'll bring an attorney on who knows something about your topic, and we'll get into it on air. When we get back, we're going to finish talking about the work that Jeff does and about violations, what it's like down there, damages. You are listening to Lewis on the Law, and I have a great show going for you. This is truly in the spirit of empowering you, the listener, and that's what I really like to do is empower you with information that may help you people make an informed decision. And though this show may not do that specifically, what we're really doing is giving you a glimpse into a very, very real and heart-rendering situation. Now, I have Jeff Nix on with me, and he is an attorney. He's a board member of the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation, and Jeff does incredible work in one of Atlanta's most impoverished areas, and it's called the BLUFF, and I'm sure some of you guys out there have heard of it. I'd heard of it before, so I mean, I'd heard of it kind of like in legendary lore, like it's a place you don't want to go. And after Jeff told me that it was an acronym that actually stands for something that says, "Buddy, you don't want to be here," it makes much more sense. So when we left off, we were talking about some of your work there. So can you finish up on that case you were talking about?
Sure. So I got involved with 5 families at an 18-unit apartment complex, actually 6 families. And 10 of the units were unoccupied. In fact, they were unoccupiable. The other 8 were occupied, but they weren't really habitable or livable. But the landlords just had decided they weren't going to fix them up. Right behind
and can they do that? I guess they can do that. They say, "I'm just not going to fix it up."
Well, you can do really anything you can get away with.
Yeah, exactly.
And part of the dilemma is, for instance, so magistrate's court runs eviction defense. They run the eviction cases. Municipal court runs the housing code violations. And municipal court housing code violations go at a very slow pace. For instance, the ones that I was involved with in this case took over a year to resolve. Meanwhile, the people that were the objects of eviction proceedings take roughly 60 days. So the families that I represented there, I represented them in repeated eviction proceedings, 3, 4, 5 eviction proceedings. Well, the housing code violation case was languishing. So we could never show the housing code violations as a defense because, of course, the landlord would say, well, that's still pending. That hasn't been resolved. Meanwhile, we're fighting the evictions.
It's almost a losing battle, isn't it?
60-day clip.
Yeah.
And so usually when you get a volunteer attorney, they want to do a case, then they want to say goodbye and go back to making money.
No, that is horrible because that's unfortunately what I do. I take a case, I negotiate some kind of deal for my tenant, and then I go back to my paying clients.
I grew a relationship with these families and seeing the conditions they were living under, and I just felt I couldn't abandon them. So I represented them in every single one of their eviction cases, which we successfully defended. And then I decided, I was an old hockey player, and I always learned that, the best defense is a good offense. So in January of 2018, I said, the heck with this. I'm really tired of playing defense. I'm going on the offense. So we sued the slumlords and went on the offense and sued them for every claim you can possibly imagine. And there was housing code violations. There were air quality issues. There were just uninhabitability issues. These clients were suffering skin rashes. There were 7 adults and 8 children, all under the age of 6. And the children were they were developing childhood asthma. They were having respiratory issues. They're having skin issues. They had bites all over their bodies.
Now that's amazing. How do you assess damages in situations like that?
It's hard because doctors don't like lawyers, and they really don't want to be around us.
Oh, okay.
And so trying to put damages on something that could last for a lifetime is next to impossible.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know that anyone's a fortune teller and they can do that. We do our best and try to figure out, medicines they're buying. These people don't have health insurance, so they're going to Grady. And then so trying to establish the causation and how it's a problem is almost impossible because they see a different emergency room doc every time they go to Grady. So you don't get any consistency. They're not like, middle-class people who have a family doctor they go to and they can say, well, you're on this medicine, so I'm not going to prescribe this or I'll prescribe you that. And sometimes if they can't, go to Grady. They just go to a Doc in the Box and pay whatever they can if they have a little money left over.
Yeah, I mean, they can't go to Dr. Nick down there on Peachtree Street and say, "Hey, fix me up," or help me.
And part of it is finding these people. AVLF did a wonderful thing. What they did, they decided in order to find people, because they're afraid of lawyers. They're afraid of anyone that looks like a lawyer because they think they're there to do them harm. AVLF embedded people, a lawyer and a social worker, in schools in the beleaguered neighborhoods.
Heard about that system.
And then they found out through the students that the parents were having difficulty, and then they found the parents rather than the parents finding them. And that's actually how I got introduced into this most recent case, was basically through the children, through the AVLF, that said the parents needed help, and then we tracked down the parents.
And that's incredible. I think some of the conditions that you've described, I mean, most people don't even believe those conditions exist, and if they saw them with their own two eyes, they would be shocked.
Well, I've lived in Atlanta for 31 years, and I didn't know the BLUFF existed till about 10 years ago. And when I went into it, I was stunned. I didn't think there was any place.
It is stunning. Just the visual image I'm getting from what you're describing, fecal or sewage running through people's kitchens, cockroaches crawling on babies. That's incredible.
It's a third world country, and people don't realize it's there because folks that live OTP outside the perimeter, they come in, they go to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and they escape. They go back north. People don't go west of the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And more recently, they've torn down everything that was blighted right around there, and they're building a park, a very fancy park that probably belongs in East Cobb County as opposed to the BLUFF. But it's kind of a buffer zone between Northside Avenue and the BLUFF. And so when you're in the BLUFF, you can see Mercedes-Benz Stadium, you can see the World Congress Center. But when you're at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, you can't really see the BLUFF.
That's incredible. And mainly, the first thing that I'm thinking is what's going to happen to a park like that? Is it going to be inundated by your darker elements who hang out in parks and deal drugs, prostitution? Who knows what could go on?
It remains to be seen. Another park that they just finished recently, right on the edge of it, on around Ashby Street, there's a number of drug dealers who occupy that area right now.
Yeah, and that's immediately what comes to mind. If they're building this immense park and it borders an area that's going through a huge drug infestation, then is that not going to just leak into the park?
It's going to be tough to prevent that from happening. And bordering this park, I mean, south of it, you really have the old Morris Brown College campus, which is shuttered and shut down. And then north of that, you have a bunch of abandoned homes that are just shuttered. So even to get to the park, well, it's a nice area, will be nice. To get there, it's not like it's user-friendly to the people in the BLUFF. It's on the very east side of the BLUFF. It's not in the heart of the BLUFF. And so, again, these folks don't have cars, so how are they going to get to this nice little playground area that they're now developing?
Yeah, that's crazy to me. At least in my mind, it seems a little bizarro world that they're putting that there. But I guess there's a reason. I guess they expect an economic uptick for that area.
Yeah, I don't see it happening right now because, again, most of the people who are investing, they're just buying the place and leaving it as is. And even a lot of the properties that have been bought by outside factors who are hoping to do good over there, I don't see those places developing. Right behind the property that I just was in the lawsuit over, there's probably a 25-unit apartment complex that was purchased by a developer approximately 18 months ago, and they had promised they were going to redevelop it. Well, they haven't done anything. It's just been fenced in, and about a year ago, there was a body found within that fence.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's the type of area you're talking about. Okay, so that's just one of the cases. You said you had another case that you were working on in that area?
Well, so we took on the 5 families and went on the offense against the landlords.
Okay.
There are multiple landlords, and in fact, when we got the first judgment against the old landlord, he immediately transferred the property. And they were a single-purpose entity that had nothing. So that was essentially rendered an uncollectible judgment. So then we went after the new landlords. And just yesterday, we reached a settlement with the new landlords and the old landlords for $125,000 for these 5 families.
Okay, because so that's the tricky business of corporations. They'll just transfer a property into another shelter corporation that has, or shell corporation that has absolutely no assets.
Yeah.
And then you're left with a judgment against zero.
Yeah, but it's a good reason why we then help them and go on the offense. I've always said if you sit back and play defense all day long, you're never going to bloody the nose of the bad actor.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to bloody their nose and teach them a lesson so they stop the bullying.
Yeah.
One of the things that you find out, though, I mean, there's so many things about the working poor that most of us never envision. So one of the things we found out that these 5 families who now are going to get a sizable check, they don't have bank accounts.
No.
They pay everything with money orders. And
I've seen that before.
Just have a distrust of institutions and banks. So now we have to figure out how do you get the money and then what are they going to do with it?
This has been an incredible episode. The stories you just told me have been incredible, and I really hope that people's eyes are opened up, and if they have serious issues, if people are in this type of situation and you need help, contact Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers, contact Jeff. Jeff, will you give them some contact information for you and AVLF real quickly?
Sure. Again, my name is Jeff Nix. I'm an attorney with Taylor, English, and Duma. My contact information is 404-307-2625. And the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation, Cole Thaler, who's a wonderful fella, and he works with eviction defense and trying to keep people in their homes. And his contact information is 404-521-0790.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law. This has been an incredible and empowering show. I love stuff like this. You really give people a glimpse into what we as attorneys do. And Jeff, you're right there in the front lines, being a true engineer of society here, addressing and readdressing issues that affect people. Thanks a lot. I'd like to give a shout out to the guys that make the magic happen. Sam Davis over there pushing the knobs, making the miracle, keeping the dream alive, and Mr. Anthony Cook, who is putting it all together. You're listening to Lewis on the Law. I love you guys.